Welcome to Dairy Robot Radio, the show that provides answers to your most pressing questions about dairy farming and automation. Each episode will focus on a major topic within the dairy industry and will feature experts throughout our industry and within Lely to help provide information and different perspectives on automation. And now, here's your host, Preston Vincent.
Welcome back, everybody, to Dairy Robot Radio. This is your host, Preston Vincent, and glad to be with you again for another episode of Dairy Robot Radio. Today I am in Plymouth, Indiana, across the table from Brian Houin, and today we are very excited to have them be a guest on the podcast to talk a little bit about their family story of why going into the robots. There's a lot of unique things here at Homestead Dairy, and Brian's been integral in leading that for his family. Obviously, they are the largest robotic dairy in North America with the most number of robots under one roof. So that brings lots of excitement for many things, but also brings lots of questions for people out into the industry. So today we're going to dive into a bunch of those discussions. And I'll turn it over to Brian to allow him to introduce himself, and then we'll get into it.
So I'm Brian Houin from Homestead Dairy, and we've got 36 robots in big box design, and the whole story, kind of started. We were ready to build a rotary dairy, and a friend of mine told me that I should take a look at robots. So we started talking about the reasons why. Labor's obviously been a big issue, continues to be an issue here in the United States. It's costing more, and what's labor going to cost 5 to 10 years from now is anybody's guess. And then just talking about the benefits of robotic milking and allowing the cow to have more freedom. So we started looking around as a family to different farms that had robots. And it was pretty amazing just after the first one, seeing how different the cows acted. The behavior on the cow was completely different, and that really was an eye-opener for us that, for cow behavior and cow comfort, it made sense. And so we had lots of discussion over the next 3 to 5 months on is it economical on a large scale, and so we started running some scenarios on what to expect as far as increased milk production, better better health on the cows, and it was kind of interesting, and so when we made the decision, one of the other advantages to going to robots is you can kind of do it in phases. We've always kind of done things here in phases. Now, granted, this was a pretty big phase, the biggest step we've ever taken. But when you do a rotary, you got to fill it as fast as possible. And going in, we knew we didn't want to buy outside cattle. We, with the genetics and our management, we wanted to grow internally, and going with robots and kind of doing it one step at a time allowed us to fill it with our own cattle. But our initial design was real similar to what our rotary design was going to be, with 3 natural vent barns and having the robots on the outside, so that way if the robots didn't work, we could throw them away and put in a rotary. But then, right before we started building, we got approached by the company, the big box company, and we had seen several of the cross vent barns. We were intrigued by it. We kind of liked it, but the one thing we weren't really a fan of was the baffles inside of the robot barns. It felt like it closed things up, and this design allows us to have the benefits of a cross vent barn without having the baffles. And obviously then at that point we were more confident that the robots were going to work, and so that's what kind of led us to this design. And the whole reason for the 3 robot pens, how that happened was when we were doing our natural vent design, having 2 robot pens, we were getting too far away from the milking center. And so we had talked about the possibility of doing 3 robots per pen to get the robots closer to the milking center. And we felt that there wasn't a big difference trying to find one cow in 120 versus one cow in 180. We were already running 180 cow pens, so that really didn't seem to make much of a difference. And the one kind of cool thing that really intrigued us about doing 3 robots is if you've got 2 robot pens and one robot's down, all of a sudden you lose 50% of your production capabilities. But if you've got 3 robots and one goes down, you only lose 33% of your production capabilities. Exactly. And so having this 3 robots in a pen actually kind of we felt was actually more beneficial. And so that's kind of why we chose to go that direction. And yeah, 2 years in, we've, I guess, embraced that design. I mean, obviously we built it, so you've got to embrace it, but we think it's been working really well.
Excellent. Yeah, and like Brian just touched on, a lot of different things and different ideas were melded into what is built and what has been run for the last 2 years. I think February marked the 2-year anniversary of the first startup.
Yep.
And so big achievement there, but yeah, it's a great point, and throughout the story, as Brian had told of Homestead Dairy, there is some uniqueness all the way throughout. He touched on the big box barn design, also the layout of the robots, 3 in a pen, and the orientation of those 3 are what we call the inline, 3 in a row. Also too, the way the land laid allowed for the idea of putting in a subway system underneath the barn for all the milk lines and mechanical air lines, electrical stuff to run underneath versus above. So that was unique. And then as well too, a great aspect of the barn is, direct load milk, and having currently 36 robots being all the milk being sent to one milk house, and in the future it's there could be more robots tied into that same milk house as well, and that is a great achievement. It's just great that there wasn't a situation to where multiple milk houses had to be built and add that extra cost, which is not acceptable for a large dairy. We got to be able to get it, and this design allowed that to happen. So maybe we'll go into a couple of those in specific. And we could start with the layout. The 3 in a row, the inline. You talked about 3 robots in a pen, but talk about the reason for the 3 in a row.
Well, the biggest reason for 3 in a row is having all the robots the same. So that way, if you train the cow on one robot, they're all the same in the pen. So you don't have to retrain them to a different robot. And then just the ease of having 6 robots in one robot room for maintenance and keeping things clean. Those were the 2 biggest reasons that we stayed with the inline. I know one of the concerns was if the robots were able to sort 3 in a line, and really we haven't seen that being an issue. It was pretty amazing to see how quickly the cows adapted to moving gates by themselves. That was something that we thought was going to take more time for the cows to adapt, but it's pretty funny watching them fight over those swing gates to see which cow's going to win. But so that really didn't scare us. But really the design, what makes it the most beneficial is we are permitted to add a 3rd on to the barn in the future if we choose to. And having all the main lines in that subway makes it very efficient and cost effective to do the addition onto the barn. You just knock the end of the subway out and you just extend everything out. The basement is already sized to handle the additional 3rd onto the barn as far as the electric and plumbing. So when or if we choose to do that addition, it makes it very economical to do.
Yeah, and like the way the site sat as well, there's some natural fall that allowed such a thing too. So there wasn't a lot of dirt work that had to go into doing that versus having just a a flat field where you would have extensive amount of dirt work to do.
Yeah, and that was kind of the goal of the owner of Big Box, was being that this was the first to have the basement, and ideally we would have had the barn facing south, not west again, with the prevailing wind. But for the ease of having to move less dirt, we had natural fall to the west, and so that's what we chose to do. And as long as you don't have a really strong west wind, it works really well. I think in the future we're talking about putting some trees up along the west side to kind of help block the wind in those instances. But yeah, it's really neat having the milk haulers actually pull underneath the barn when they want to load out their milk. So it is very unique.
Okay, so 2 years in, what have you learned? What's the most telling things or takeaways you've learned in 2 years' time that maybe you didn't know when you started?
I think the biggest thing we learned, and relatively early on, is that calves that are raised in an auto feeder barn adapt to the robots a lot better than calves that were raised in hutches. It was really dumb luck that, and timing was impeccable. We put in the auto feeders roughly 2 years before we started the robots, and so when we first started up, the fresh heifers that were calving were raised in hutches, and we had a little bit of struggle. I mean, not all of them, but we struggled with some of the fresh heifers early on, adapting and going in on their own. And then about 2 to 3 months after we started in the robots, we started calving in heifers that were raised in the auto feeder barn, and the difference was just unbelievable. To think that the calf, or the heifer now, or fresh heifer, remembered the training that she got as a calf. Just when she's hungry, she'd go to the feeder, and that's the same in the robot now. They're hungry, they go to the robot, or basically take care of themselves. And a majority, we still have some that don't want to adapt, but for the most part, the fresh heifers adapt a lot better. And even now, going into second lactation, the only cows we're bringing into the robot barn, if they haven't already been in the robot, is cows going in on their second lactation that were raised in the auto feeder barn, because 2/3 of them by the first week are coming in on their own, and it's just makes things a lot easier. Yeah, I mean, we've found there's the robots do a really good job at attaching, so there's very few cows that we have to worry about udder placement. I mean, there's a few, but for the most part, it's if the cow adapts and comes into the robot, they're on their own and take care of themselves. So we're still kind of working through some waves of drying off cows at a lot at the same time, and freshening a bunch at the same time, but we think we're starting to get that more evened out, and yeah, now the goal is to we're still about 50 cows short of being 60 cows per robot, but the goal is to be there consistently, and you're freshening in cows as you're drying off, so you stay consistently full robot herd.
Yeah, great points. And for those that don't know or haven't been able to visit Homestead Dairy yet, they have the Forester Technica auto feeders for their baby calves, and run that pretty extensively and do a super job with that. Brian's wife, Jill, manages that and leads that side of it, and very, very unique, being that the size and scale they are, to have the same size and scale with the babies as well, and to see the benefits of what those two combined together offer is pretty cool. And so now 2 years into it as well, you mentioned it a little bit, that the herd's getting a bit more mature. The cattle are freshening in sometimes for their third time coming back into the robots. And so lots of things are more normalized now than they were as you did your first startup in February, and did many other startups after that first year. So, year one was startup year, and year two was waiting for those cows to freshen in again, And so now you have some of those cows freshening in again, but now they're coming for their third time. What are some of the key things you're seeing with that on performance and just on, you know, managing of those cows?
Well, the nice thing now is being that we're a more mature robot herd, we can, and close to being full, we can start being more selective on cows that aren't adapting, cows that maybe have more failures than you'd like, starting to remove some of those just to continue to step up the efficiency of the robot dairy. You know, so those are things that over the next few months we're gonna start doing. Is, you know, the cows that are consistent fetch cows, you know, we put them in the dairy that fetches, you know, 3 times a day. So those are going to be some of the things now that we'll be able to do. You know, granted now the fetching is less and it's easier because all the cows know, or, you know, 95% of the cows have been to the robot. They know what it is, and so the training is a lot less. You know, other than the few fresh heifers we bring in every week, the training is less. So we can dial our management and try to take it to the next level.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, that's exactly what we expect, you know, and I know you guys expect as well, is that when those cows come back around, that a decision's made on them. You know, are they worthy enough to participate in the next lactation within the robot barn, or should they find a new career? You know, whether it be here or at another dairy or maybe somewhere else too. You know, it's every animal has to justify their position there, and the best data you have is their data from their last lactation. And if, you know, they're not performing as to the standard, you know, it's good to be able to get to that point within the maturity of the dairy to make that decision. And I know going through it for the first couple of years, you know, you keep everything and get through, but now you reach the point to where that's kind of fun. And it only will, you know, keep improving from here, obviously. And so now with that too, what are you seeing on like a milk production or other indexes that you follow with the more mature herd versus what you saw in the start?
Well, you know, the milk production, you know, continues to run, you know, 6-7 pounds energy corrected milk better than the conventional dairy. You know, I think the biggest thing, and it'd be interesting to know if, you know, like here in the robots, you know, you put the cow in the pen and she stays there her whole lactation, and where we see the biggest benefit is on these later lactation cows. They just hold their milk a lot better than in the conventional dairy. And, you know, whether it's the newer facility or the fact that you're just not moving the cow, I think, I'm not sure, I think both of them probably play a role in that. But I think those are some of the advantages to that. But you know, repro, I think the biggest, not only the milk production, but I think the reproduction is probably the other just bigger number that you know, even though we do things differently, we're actually using less hormones here in the robot barn, but yet we're still getting a 5% better preg rate in the robot barn compared to the conventional dairy. And you know, not sure exactly why. I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the less stress and just more freedom on the cow. But you know, better heat detection, better conception rates here in the robot barn. That you know, just it's not something you have to worry about here. You know, all the other fresh cow incidences, diseases are slightly reduced. Not a huge, you know, it's not something we have a huge problem with anywhere. But the numbers are even a little bit better in the robot barn compared to the conventional. But the two biggest ones would be repro and milk production.
Great. Yeah, and I like that you talk about the energy corrected milk instead of just pounds of milk. You know, as we live in this world that's a little bit tougher with the markets we live in and have to, you know, be a part of. You know, it doesn't pay just to ship water out of the dairy. We got to have some solids into it. And I know you've always been focused on that, and that's been a bright spot going into it. You know, the cows coming into the robot facility got in a way, a bit different diet because they were eating a pelleted feed of some sort versus never having that before. But you've been able to maintain your fat corrected or energy corrected milk all the way through that, which has been very unique too and exciting. And then now being able to just continue to ratchet that up, because where you ship your milk to or who your supplier is wanting to have that type of milk, right?
Right. Yeah. So we were approached by Walmart. They were building their processing facility nearby, and they heard about our dairy and building the robots, and that kind of attracted them to us, wanting to purchase our milk, and they are more demanding for a higher quality milk, and that's been something that it's a challenge at times. There's always something that happens, but we've been able to produce a more consistent product here in the robot barn compared to our other dairies.
Excellent. And obviously there's value to that. So good. One thing I'm excited to chat about too is, and this is something that Brian and I had spoke on probably a year and a half ago, was, once things get normalized a bit, was the management of the cows and thinking about different ways of how we can go about, thinking of how to manage those cows, knowing that the robots offer some unique capabilities to manage cows differently. Just chatting with Brian before we got started here, he revealed that there's some changes in how they're going to be managing the cows going forward, and they've just had started. And I'll let you describe it.
So it was kind of a thought of mine when we were doing the robot project. Is labor's hard to find, and nobody wants to milk cows anymore. And we got a few vets from Mexico with visas, and I thought maybe we could do where the vet does the fetching and the herd work, because really fetching cows, it's not difficult. It's just walking cows to the robot, and we finally had the opportunity to try it. And so last week, we tried it with 12 robots, 4 pens, where the vet is doing the fetching and the vet work. So basically he has his own 700 cow herd, and after the first week, so far signs are that it's going to work pretty well, and so rather than having 3 fetchers in the barn with 2 vets doing the whole barn, we can use 3 vets to take care of the whole barn, and that basically eliminates 2 guys and just allows us to be even more efficient. And then it gets a better set of eyes in the pens, because the fetchers may not necessarily be, they're basically just milkers that we've converted to fetchers, so they don't know what a sick cow looks like as well of somebody that maybe would be a vet. And so they're in the pen now walking the cows, and they'll be able to catch more things that the fetcher maybe wouldn't.
Right. Yeah.
And so we're real excited about that moving forward.
Yeah, and then they're accountable for those robots and those cows, right? The 720 cows are his or hers.
Right.
To where they own the fetch cows, so they know they have to get all of them there. They own the breeding side of it. They own the preg checking side and the shots that are needed and so on. It's theirs, their little herd, and I'm sure there'll be some autonomy that you give to them to manage it how they see and want to, within the parameters as well, but still allows them to have a little bit of their uniqueness and how they want to go through the pen and do a little bit of the work. But ultimately, those 720 cows, you can go back to one person and see and track, and then look at the 3 different vets that you have and see who's performing differently and why, and then share ideas. And
yeah, I'm sure it's going to turn into a friendly competition.
Right. Hey, that's awesome. Yep, that's good. And have a little carrot out there for dangling for them to keep pushing the envelope.
Yep.
But no, that was an idea I know you brought up, like I said, a year and a half ago, and it takes a little bit of maturing. One, to find the people that are capable, and then 2, the herd maturing a little bit to go that step too.
Yeah, we had tried it after we put in the last 12 robots, and it doesn't work when when you got a whole herd of cows that are not robot trained. It was just too much fetching, and we now just tried it here again a year later, and it seems like now that it's a mature robot herd, we think it's going to work this time.
Right, excellent. Well, I'm excited to see the results and help live through with you on how it goes to to see what the real benefit was, and I'm sure there's opportunities for others to think that way as well as they look at their dairy and staff they have if they're able to, and so on. Genetics are a big part of your dairy here and what you all do. I'm kind of curious because I get lots of questions out in the field. Somebody that's looking at robotics right now, and they're maybe in 2 years going to have their dairy transition into robotics. Is there something unique that they could be doing, or maybe unique's not the right word, but something, some indexes they can look for genetically that would help get them to have more of a robot-ready type herd?
I think that's something that all the companies are starting to work on. Certainly there's companies that have what they claim are robot-ready sires. Udder placement and teat length are important, but I think we're just starting to scratch the surface there. I think we're going to be, there's going to be companies that are going to come out with more information to see if there's a genetic marker that can look at, robot visits or, adaptability, milk speed. So we're just getting to scratch the surface there, but there are some basic indexes there now that you can use. But what I look for, I'm using the Dairy Wellness Profit Dollars. I'm trying to find that cow that you don't know, that she never gets sick, she's always healthy, gives you, she may not give you top production, but she's never in the hospital pen, she gets bred back right away, and that's, I'm trying to find a herd of cows that you don't know.
Yeah. And you do a lot of genomic testing on every animal, but also you get a lot of phenotypic data as well, and the robots provide a lot as well from milk speed and visits. Are there certain animals or certain families that you're seeing in the barn that you're now in turn flushing because phenotypically their milk speed is at a different level than others?
I haven't got to that level yet. I'm basically still looking at the genomic data. I'm not really looking at the phenotypic data. I did have, my favorite cow. She was one of the first ones that went through the auto feeder, adapted really well there. One of the first ones that freshened directly into the robots, and she's peaked way higher than her genomic expectations were. Her genetics were below average. So when it came time to breeding her, I had a tough time deciding what to do. But my thought process was, if she does have a heifer calf, I'm going to look at that genomic data, and if it again is below average, she's never going to make it back, even though, she's definitely an anomaly, and been a very good robot cow. She's almost dry now for second lactation. She's never been sick, never had a case of mastitis, goes to the robot 4 times a day. The ideal robot cow. But it's really tough to make, on this number of animals, it's hard to make phenotypic decisions when you've got so much other information in front of you.
Yep. So maybe when you have the other side of it, higher genomic animal coming into it, and then she is in turn obviously living up to her genetics, and she has milk speed that's just at a different rate. Those are the kind of animals you might look at potentially flushing or doing something with genetically to capture those indexes that genomics just doesn't provide yet, like milk speed, or I don't really know what it is. It's just a will to be an independent cow, to go and live in a barn that offers as much independence as they want, but one that just succeeds that way. Because I think in time we'll get that with genomics, but just it isn't right now. Right. And obviously the T4C data gives you the milk speed, but I agree, you got to have both. You got to have the genomics plus the phenotypic together to make the decision for 2 or 3 years down the road when that animal comes back in.
Yeah, and I think it's going to take, some company, whether it's Lely or Valley Ag or maybe even a semen company, trying to pull all that data together where you're not just looking at the genomic data, but you can also use the on-farm phenotypic data to maybe create a new index that encompasses all of that.
Right, to help for the future for sure. Yeah, agreed. So I think probably the next question is what's next? What's next for Homestead Dairy as you look into the future and with a mature herd now and staff that's elevated to a level of doing new things? What's next on the horizon?
Well, I mean, right now it's we're just kind of holding on like everybody else. We thought we were timing this project in an up market, and obviously that didn't happen. So we're having economic challenges just like anybody else. So we're just consistently trying to find ways to increase efficiency, improve milk production, and eventually we're going to look at how are we going to continue on. I can tell you we don't plan on building another conventional dairy again. So the biggest discussion is when we add the third onto this barn, what is it going to look like? Is it going to be 48 robots with a dry cow facility, or 72 robots and we're just milking cows here? That's probably the biggest decision we'll have to make. The timing of that decision is going to depend on, of course, on what the milk markets do in the next few years. But right now it's just hold on and continue to find ways to get better.
Yeah, that sums it up well, because like you said, everybody's doing the same that way, and nice to be able to live with a mature herd during that time period and mature labor force to where you can play with that to really get to that point, because that's key. That's the people out there doing it and the cows out there doing it. They got to perform. So having them with experience helps you do that.
Yep.
Well, excellent, Brian. I think that was very informative, and appreciate you being a guest on our podcast today. I'm sure you'll hear from me in the future too as we go down the road. Maybe in the future I'll bother you again to have you join, as I know everybody on listening is going to be excited to learn about Homestead Dairy and everything you've done, and you have always been generous to us and generous to the industry. And so as new things develop and there's new learnings or new unique things, maybe in the future we'll do this again.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Dairy Robot Radio, the show for dairy producers who want their questions answered by experts in dairy automation. Connect with us at dairyrobotradio.com to listen to all episodes and learn more about the topics and guests on the show. You can also find us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify.